Hey everybody, it's Peter, and this is going to be a fun one, especially for people looking for small displacement bikes or beginner bikes. So what I have to the right here is the Duke 390, KTM's Duke 390. We've talked about that 390 series of bikes, the Adventure, the Duke, the RC as well. And I have another Duke over here, the Duke 250. Now this is the first 2025 motorcycle that I reviewed. This one happens to be 2024, but that won't matter. And what I'm going to do in this video is not compare the specs of each. You can do that on the website. I'm going to talk about some of the practical differences and help you decide which one's best for you, because a lot of people are going to steer you towards this one, and rightfully so. But there is definitely a market for this one, and it's a narrower market, and I'm going to help you decide if that's you in this video. So I'm filming here at McLean Sports. If you have any questions about pretty much anything motorcycle, these guys give me complete access to their KTM, their Yamaha, their Suzuki, and way more. And if you have questions, I can come back to these bikes again and again, or other bikes in the lineup. So do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, leave a positive comment, that kind of thing. Just helps me out, and it helps this spread. The more this spreads, the more time I get to spend doing it, and the more content I can get for you. So let's get going with this review. So KTM's Duke lineup is all about sport and fun. And for a lot of manufacturers, they would introduce a 390, say that's our entry-level bike, especially here in North America. They would introduce a 390, say that's our entry-level bike, and they would move up from there. And if you just did that with KTM's lineup, they would have a great sort of entry-level bike. They would have great bikes moving on beyond that, and all of the Dukes are great for fun. That's what their key thing is. So why have the 250 in the lineup? Well, the 250 is a more entry-level bike, and I don't like to talk about low displacement bikes as beginner bikes, because I think there's a lot of experienced riders, myself included, who really enjoy small displacement bikes. This 250 though, to me, is far more of a beginner bike. Now, in that beginner bike class, this might be one of the best out there, especially in that 250, 300cc class, because it has a lot of things going for it that you don't get in other 250s. The problem with this bike is just that this bike exists. So you have to decide, do you want to save a little bit of money, have just as much fun on a bike with a little bit less power, a little bit less displacement, and potentially a little bit less resale value, only because this one is so much more popular than this one. That's what we're going to talk about in this video. We're going to show you some of the differences. We're going to show you size differences, that kind of thing. We're going to show you the differences in the dash, because those are significant. There's differences in suspension, and those are worth noting as well. And then at the end, we're going to try to wrap it up and help you decide who this is really for, and if you should maybe spring for something like that, which costs more, but maybe better suited to you. Sales guy will always try to turn you to that, because they probably have more of those on order than these, but that may or may not be right for you. So don't always listen to the sales guy. Listen to what's best for you. So if you've never seen my videos before, I always start at the front tire, because you can really tell the manufacturer's intent of the bike, not just from the front tire, but the front wheel section here. And again, looking at this bike in a vacuum, looking at this bike just by itself, without the 390, this would be pretty impressive stuff. You've got a big disc brake. A single disc is all you need on lower displacement bikes that don't have a ton of power, don't have a ton of weight. So single disc, but it does have ABS. That's what that ring is there for. It's ABS. You have upside down suspension, which is a really good thing. Gives you a lot of stiffness up top, gives you a little bit less unsprung weight down low. So all of that is good. You have what they call radial mount calipers. So what this is even though these are not huge calipers compared to like a super sport that with like 1000cc, you have all of the function there to have the stiff quality braking systems that you would have on a super sport bike. So you right away can see KTM is aiming this in that sporty environment, and that makes sense. Like I said, the Duke only exists to have fun on. So the Duke 250 has got to be a fun bike. Now, one thing I noticed that it's hard to show on video, the profile of the tires that come on this, they seem to be more peaked, almost triangular. What that means is that it will dive into corners very quickly compared to other small tires like this that are a little more entry level, or I don't even know if it's entry level, it's just a little different design, right? So this is going to feel nice and darty back and forth, and that's what you want in a low displacement bike. One thing with small displacement bikes is you can't replicate how they feel. It's like driving a go-kart versus a Porsche. A Porsche has a lot more weight, is still a lot of fun, has a lot of power, but it does not replicate the feeling of a go-kart, and that's kind of what these small displacement bikes do. They're a ton of fun to drive, even at slower speeds, because of the way they're designed. So everything from tire to suspension and brake, all of that tells me, hey, this is going to be a fun to drive little 250 bike. Let's compare that to the 390. Looking at the Duke 390, you actually have the same size tire, obviously a different color rim, that's just more styling. You still have the upside down suspension, the big disc, you have the ABS ring, you have the radial mount calipers, so you'd think, okay, this is all identical, but what you see a little different here is some red marks here, including this little red elastic. This red elastic is something that you can use to tell how you've adjusted your suspension. You can see this one's just moved down here. Maybe you can't see that on camera, but what you can do is you can adjust this suspension. That is a super bike style piece that is on this bike that is not on the 250. Now, if you are the kind of person to want to play with your suspension or learn to play with your suspension in the future, you can do that with this. And what this will do is it will tell you over a set area how far down the suspension has compressed, and you can sort of see it reaches various levels there. So that will squish down and kind of tell you where the suspension is compressed, and as you drive along, you can kind of see how much suspension you're using and that kind of thing. You can see it, use that to measure a bunch of different ways. So KTM is introducing the idea of adjustable suspension for faster lap times on this. Adjustable suspension isn't really about comfort on a sport bike, it's about faster lap times. So this one, in theory, can take you down that road where the 250 can't. So taking a look at the heart of the bike here, we're actually not going to talk about the two engines. We're back to the 250 here, and we're going to save real talk on the engines for a riding review, but there are key spec differences that are going to make a difference to you. If you look at this and you look at the 390, you're going to see very, very, very similar overall look to the bike. In fact, many people will not know that this is a 250 over a 390, but I do want to show you a difference in the rear suspension as well to show you some of the differences. So staying with the 250 here and taking a look at the rear shock, you have preload adjustments. Now the preload adjustment is fairly common even for this class. So let's just zoom in, and I say fairly common, it's not that common, but it's fairly common on the sporty bike class. And you can see what you do with your preload adjustment is it's a tooled movement. So sometimes there's on higher end bikes, they have a remote preload adjustment. You can move it without tools. Or various ways to do that. But this basically compresses the shock to a different level each time. And there's lots of steps in here, which is what you want to see. A lot of bikes don't have as many steps as this, so the 250 still has preload adjustment on its shock, but it has no other adjustments. We zoom back out and take a look at the bottom of this shock here. You're going to see it just solidly mounts to the pivot point. Now I want to point out, if we go wide angle, I'm a little too close to film this, but the whole engine and everything is very compressed. It's moved forward, so you have weight down low and forward, which is going to be the key to giving you good handling. So they've definitely focused this for great handling, but again, less adjustments in the suspension than on the 390. So filming wide angle here, we're going to go back into the standard angle at the shock there. Let's move over to the shock on the 390. So over here on the 390, we're going to zoom in again. You can see at the center of your screen there, you've got the same sort of preload adjustment there, same type of setting. But as we move down the shock here, you can see a little different coloring there, the red or orange, I guess, color there. It looks a little bit red to me on screen, but it should be orange. We'll see how it turns out in the editing there. And then you can see there's an adjustment here. Now this does require some tools. It's a screwdriver to adjust your suspension even more. So you can tweak the suspension on the 390 more than you can, even the rear suspension, more than the 250. So when we talk about preload adjustment, basically the preload adjustment is going to be adjusted for the weight of the rider, right? But the other stuff is what you tend to adjust to help with your lap times and that kind of thing. Now it can change the comfort, but that's really what we're dealing with. So let's start here by sitting on the 250. Now as far as weight and everything else goes, I'm about 175 pounds. Sorry, I thought the rear peg was down, but it's not. I'm about 175-ish pounds. I'm about 6 feet tall, proportional inseam, that kind of thing. Jumping on this little 250, first thing you notice, it is light and it is compact. Now that doesn't mean that it's bad. A lot of times compact actually means quite sporty. It also has a fairly upright seating position, so you can comfortably drive this in and around town with great visibility. It really is what you want in a beginner bike. If you want to tuck in and get low, you can. You're not going to lean on the tank the same way you would on a sport bike just because of the general size and compactness of it, but you can still absolutely get down and very much feel this bike. Because it's more of a naked bike, you can see the front wheel over your gauge cluster. It's a narrow bike. It's very lightweight, very confidence inspiring, but still has a pretty sporty feel. You can see the angle of my leg here keeps your foot peg high enough that it keeps the wheel off the ground. So you can really, or sorry, the foot peg off the ground when you're leaning, so you can really lean this thing over. Mirrors are just fine. They're good. Actually, they're quite good visibility overall. as I adjust them out for me. I could tweak it a hair for me, but pretty good visibility for a beginner bike. The dashes are very different on this bike, but there you go. There's me on the 250. Let's jump back over to the 390 now and talk about the differences. Now, I haven't done this back to back. I was saving it for the video. This one does feel a tiny bit wider in the seat to me, a tiny bit. Now, that might just be feel. Overall, similar seating position, I would say. The tank size here with the angle appears to be a hair bigger, but I'm gonna be honest, they feel very similar. If you're comfortable on one, you're probably going to be comfortable on the other one. So if you don't get a chance to sit on one over the other and you want to kind of know, they're going to feel similar. They're not that much different in overall feel. Compact, maybe I'm a hair more leaned forward now. I don't really know. The mirrors seem a little bit lower to me, but I think they're basically the same as well. So again, very similar feel on both, maybe identical feel on both. Hard to say for sure. So as a rider, the biggest difference you're going to notice between these two bikes is in the dash. Now, I have praised KTM dashes recently. For the most part, they are, in my opinion, among the class leaders, if not the class leaders, pretty much in every category. So there are several good in certain categories, but KTM is never poor. This is the exception. It's a bit of a mixed bag here. You have something that is not a, first of all, ignore the flickering that you're seeing. That is just the camera interacting with the screen. I will say that KTM has this TFT display they use everywhere else. You're gonna see that in a second on the 390, which is just better to look at. Now, stepping back, it's not that the display, it's not that the content is poor, but the general screen is not, to me, of the highest quality, even in the black and white. So it's fine. It doesn't have any of that flicker or scrolling stuff that you see on your camera, which I'm sure is super annoying on your full screen if you're watching this on TV or on your phone or whatever else you're watching it. That's not gonna show up in real life, but it's a little bit dim. The fonts could be a little bit crisper in this section in particular, but we're gonna move through some of that kind of thing. We're moving away from that, but yeah, this shaded area here is just awkward to me. Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit more and kind of get to fade. Yeah, it's just an uneven shading to me. It's hard to see exactly, but again, it's just something that I'm really nitpicking about. We'll just let's kind of go full wide angle here, back to the regular, zoom back in. It's not bad, but it's not the best there is. To me, it could be better, but again, KTM saving money. Now, where you have very good things is in this. You have ABS menu, which can turn off the rear ABS. You may or may not want to do that, but that's pretty much their ABS mode here, which is a supermoto mode, is what they call it in their street bikes, and they call it a rally mode in their off-road bikes. You have bike info here. We'll just dip into that for a second. Engine temperature, range in kilometers. The battery's at 12.4 volts right now. Odometer, service, that kind of stuff. We can come back out of there. We can go to trip info, navigation info. So you do have basic navigation because you can pair a cell phone with this and you can kind of get through there. So again, you have sort of a turn-by-turn available to you through a phone and through the KTM's app. And then audio player, so we can do that as well, which is basically connecting your phone into here. So for actual features, this thing's fantastic, but for the screen quality, it just could be a little crisper. Even if you want to stay with the black and white, I feel like it's not the best quality black and white screen. Not a huge complaint. It's totally fine within the class. You've got everything you need. Gear indicator up top here. You've got a speedometer right there. So you have the basics, which is really good. And you have far more than the basics in content. It's just the actual screen itself isn't perfect. But again, far better than what you're seeing on screen. It shows much better in person. Stepping away from the screen, staying with the 250 here, you have a lot that I like. These controls are excellent. They would be great on a bike, 5 times the price of this bike. Some bikes still don't get the controls as good as KTM does, so they have good clickiness to the feel. These ones here are actually backlit, so you can see them at night, which controls are, and that's what controls the menus in the dash. And kudos to KTM, they allow you to adjust pretty much everything while you're riding. Now, that doesn't mean you should. If you're a new rider, don't start screwing with things when you're riding. It's not safe. But the fact that you can quickly identify the buttons and quickly change things, even at slow speed, even without having to come to a complete stop all the time, that's a pro. But be careful if you're a new rider. Signal lights, horn light, all good quality stuff. You also have a hazard warning light or a 4-way flasher, which I really appreciate because on a newer bike, newer rider, you may want to stop, especially to fix some navigation type stuff. You may want to figure stuff out. And then you also have a pull trigger over here and for your high beams, so you can flash your high beams. I believe, yep, you can push it away as well to lock your high beams on. So push it away to lock your high beams on, and then a spring-loaded trigger right there to flash them if you want. All of that is fantastic stuff for a little 250. Like I said, there's no issues with this bike whatsoever when you just compare it on its own, other than the dash could be better, but that's nitpicking, and I only say that because KTM puts such great dashes in every other bike they have. Only thing I should mention here, there's the controls over there, kill switch, start switch on that side, and then you have non-adjustable suspension you can see on the top of the suspension post. Basically, it looks the same on both sides. Now let's move to the 390. All right, moving over to the 390, this is what I'm talking about with a great dash. Like, this is class-leading stuff. Now, you're gonna see some flickers in there as well. Again, it's the camera interacting, and I gotta be very clear with you, this is super crisp. It doesn't look anywhere near as crisp on camera as it does in real life, but I think it looks a lot better in real life, or on the camera even, and you can sort of see you've got really good stuff going on here. So, big neutral indicator, launch mode you've got here, which again on a 390 I'm not sure you need, but you have it. Road ABS, same type of thing. You've got a traction control system here, you've got lap timers, all kinds of stuff. You can customize this in a whole bunch of ways that the other bike could, and even more. We won't go into all those details, but you have a lot here, and boy does this dash look really, really good and clear, crisp and clear. Fuel gauge, speedometer, everything is clear. The or tachometer works its way up on this gray area. I don't know if you can see its grayed out area there, but a really, really nice dash here. I should mention that both of these, you can see it right on the side here, right there, both have a little cap that comes out here. That is a USB port. Both bikes have that. You can power your cell phone or something else like that and stick it on a, you know, whatever you want, a quad lock or something like that, and have it on this bike. So that is available. The controls are identical in both. So we showed you the one, oops, let me try to zoom in there. Try to zoom in again. There we go. We showed you on the other bike, same exact thing here, same thing with the headlights, same thing there. Now you do have an adjustable clutch lever here, and you have an adjustable brake lever as well. So what that does is it adjusts the reach of the clutch lever and brake lever. Now for most part, it doesn't matter what size your hands are, you can fit that, you reach that lever. A lot of people think you have adjustable levers for reach. That's one option, but the other thing it does is it lets you adjust where that clutch is going to sit at the grab point and where the brake is going to sit at the grab point. So it gives you a little bit more precise control. Again, things you get in more expensive bikes. Both of these bikes really outclass their CC level. But again, they are different, and one is certainly better. The 390 is obviously better. Same controls over on this side here. We are going to take a look at the suspension right now, but we have to move the camera a second, so let's do that because it is worth talking about this adjustable suspension. All right, so we're still on the 390. We're looking at the left side fork tube, and you can see this is a manually adjustable, so I can move this with my fingers at any time, and there's clicks in there. So I just moved it one click there, one click back. I'm going to keep it where I started it. Basically what this is there's a left side is white and the right side is red. Red, rebound. White is compression. If you want to adjust the compression and rebound adjustments on the front forks, you can do that only on the 390. You can't do that on the 250. It is a nice little selling feature. Most of the time when you move up to super sport bikes, you have tools to adjust these kind of things. You can adjust these in theory while you're riding. Again, you shouldn't do that, but you can adjust them without tools anywhere you go. So you can go zip down that country road, adjust your suspension, try the country road again, no tools necessary. It really is a great bike to teach you a little bit more. And as we talk about bikes that teach you, let's talk about the two of these bikes and help decide which one's best for you. So I hear a lot of people like myself, people on YouTube, telling beginners to start with a smaller displacement bike because it'll help teach you. Now I also hear a lot of bad advice saying, oh, you don't have to start with that small a bike. I did XYZ and I was fine. So let's talk about what they mean by teaching you. A smaller bike can teach you. So both of these bikes, of course, have manual transmissions and you have to learn to use them. When you're on a smaller bike, you're going to have to shift more often. Now that doesn't mean you do shift more often, because on my 950cc bike, I still get into 6th gear by 80 kilometers an hour, 100 kilometers an hour, 50, 60 miles an hour, that kind of thing. So I'm still shifting as often as you would on these bikes to be at 100 kilometers an hour. The difference is 2nd gear takes me to 60 miles an hour, whereas this one you're going to need several more gears, and this one you're going to need several more gears to get there. But the reality is we all shift to the 6th gear as we move along and get up to highway speed. The difference on these bikes is you have to shift, and it allows you to rev the bike out a little bit more. And what you find when you drive a smaller displacement bike is, as you're going around many corners, you're going to have to shift mid-corner. You don't have to do that with a bike with more power. As you're riding along with friends, you're going to have to keep some momentum. If you're trying to hit the country road and do it well, you can really find that point in the power band where you make good power. You can really find that point where you make that clean shift, where it keeps your momentum and does that kind of thing. So a small bike just teaches you things that the power of a big bike don't teach you. So if I mess up on my bike on a shift, I barely notice because I just give it a lot of power. The bike revs so quickly, I've made up for that shift. But on a small bike, you're learning to be precise with your movements, leaning back and forth. You can very quickly dart these bikes left and right. A bigger bike that's heavier, you have to make that decision a split second earlier in order to have it darting back and forth. This one you can react late like beginners normally do and still have the advantage of being able to move along and do what you need to do. So from handling to braking, now these ones both have ABS, that's going to help, but especially in shifting and just general movement, body position, everything else, a small bike is a great teacher. And in my opinion, a small sporty bike is a far better teacher than a small cruising bike because you can really learn those corners better, which is important to know and have just in your muscle memory when you need to make an emergency maneuver. You've got to be able to corner quickly, efficiently, properly, and safely. And small bikes, because, especially the sporty bikes, because you have a tendency to want to get a little quicker around the corner and just do things a little bit better, they really do teach you. I learned on a little 234cc bike. I moved up to a 499cc bike, then a 650 bike, and then on to other bikes from there. But the point is, and actually really I learned on an 80cc scooter to start. So the point is, when you learn on these smaller displacement bikes, you learn to enjoy the smaller displacement bikes and you get to be very good. So when you have these bigger bikes, all of the intimidation factor of the extra power dissipates because you know how to ride at any speed and you know how to shift and you know how to corner, you know how to brake, all of those things you've learned at lower levels, right? So again, these ABS brakes with smaller wheels, maybe less grippy tires, the tire might lock a little sooner than on a Super Sport that has really grippy tires. But if you lock this bike, you're probably locking the wheels and activating the ABS at lower speeds. All of those things are good to have. They really can teach you better. So which one's best for you? Let's talk about that. So here's where motorcyclists get things wrong. The 390 is a better bike than the 250. That's hard to argue. It's just a better bike. But the problem becomes that there is a better KTM Duke than the 390. It's called the 790. And there's a better one than the 790. It's called the 990. There will always be a better bike. Even when one's at the top of its game, top of its class, top of everything, the next year there's gonna be a better bike. You're not always buying the best bike. Take a walk around your neighborhood. Look in the driveways. Your neighbors don't all drive Consumer Reports top-rated vehicle. You have to buy the bike that's best for you and the bike you're going to be happy with. Now, if you're looking at these two bikes, you're probably looking at small displacement bikes. You're accepting that they're not going to be as fast as a 1000cc super bike. You're accepting that they're going to have a few less features. You're accepting that they also cost less. So why buy the 250 over the 390? 250 is going to cost less to purchase. Now, I personally think it's going to take a little bit more of a depreciation hit because I think most people looking for an entry-level bike are not overly intimidated by a 390 compared to a 250. So sometimes that's where people shop. Oh, I'm okay with a 390 but not bigger, but I don't want to go, lower than a 250 because I want to be able to go highway speeds. If you are someone who is never going to play with a suspension, who wants an entry-level bike at the cheapest entry-level price and wants good technology and wants to keep that 250 for a while, you just want something lighter weight, or if you want to turn this into a little 250 race bike and do that once you're done learning, this is a great option. If you have people to hand it down to within your family or friend group and that kind of thing that you want to sell it to and keep that, 250 bikes are excellent to learn on. If this was the only entry-level bike, I would have no hesitation in recommending this bike to absolutely anyone as a 250 beginner bike. The difference is this 390. The 390 class in general, now I prefer the Adventure over the Duke, but the 390 is a bike that me as an experienced rider still enjoys. It has a better dash than my 950 motorcycle. It has better features overall than that 950. Now, to be fair, the 250 does too, with some navigation, not a better dash, but better features with that navigation, integration, that kind of thing. But this is a bike with the adjustable suspension that I can continue to learn on as an experienced rider. And that's where I would learn on. I know how to ride the bike now, but now I can graduate to playing with the suspension. My bike has adjustable suspension. I play with it, I can adjust it, and it teaches me what it all does. But the fact that you can do it manually on here is, again, going to teach you things over and over and over again in your everyday riding that you can be better at. So, if price matters more than anything, and you just want to get out there and get riding, this might be the best 250 bike out there for features, for sportiness, for fun, that kind of thing. This is a really good package. But if you're going to walk in the showroom and you have a little bit more money, I still think this is the one to go with. I don't have any issues recommending this to a beginner. It's got way more features than a beginner would ever need. But one of the issues with beginner bikes is sometimes people feel they can't live with that little power, and at least when you have less power, you still have all the features. This is a hard bike to move up from, because as you move up, you're going to lose things, like to the 650 class. Generally, you're going to lose, or 600 class, that kind of thing, you're going to lose the adjustable suspension. You may even lose the upside down suspension. You may lose the quality of the digital dash. You may lose some of the features of all these things. So it's a harder bike to move on from, simply because it kind of gives you everything you need except for crazy tons of power. Which one's best for you? That's up to you. If I'm missing something, if there's a question you have about these two that I haven't answered, by all means, ask me in the questions below, ask me in the comments below, and give this video a like, hit the subscribe button. We got lots of beginner bikes on this channel, but it's hard to know which one to recommend. On its own, no problem recommending this bike, but there's a reason that KTM sells a whole lot more of these than they do of these, because with this sitting next to it in the showroom, although it costs a little bit more, I think overall cost of ownership may not be a whole lot more, especially when you consider resale value. So those are the two small KTM Dukes. Lots more to talk about. We'll talk to you in the next one.